Welcome, my dear students of class 8A and 8B, to my civics class. I am going to explain some points about the Prime Minister. What are the functions of the Prime Ministers? What are the powers of the Prime Ministers? How can he or she use his powers? And how does he influence over other ministers by way of making his own policies? I am going to discuss these points. First point, I am going to discuss what is this. The first one, leader of the Lok Sabha. The Prime Minister is the leader of the Lok Sabha. The Prime Minister advises the President of India to adjourn the House or to dissolve the Lok Sabha. That means the President cannot dissolve the Lok Sabha without the consent of the Prime Minister. Number one. And number two, the President can dismiss, the Prime Minister can dismiss any minister, but the President can't. Since the Prime Minister is the leader of the House, leader of the two houses of Parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, on behalf of his political party, the Prime Minister rectifies some policies of his or her government. The Prime Minister protects the government. The Prime Minister protects his ministers when they can't face the questions of, they can't face properly the questions of different members of Parliament. The Prime Minister can dismiss the Lok Sabha, but by advising the President, the Prime Minister can adjourn the House. The President can adjourn the House. The President just follows the advices of the Prime Minister. For example, one minister in the House of Parliament failed to clarify one point or one issue of his own department, of his own, of his own agenda, but the Prime Minister had to answer it. In that case, the Prime Minister, in that case, that very minister can be dismissed by the Prime Minister, because Prime Minister appoints those ministers who are his reliable persons, on whom he has faith and belief. But whenever some ministers fail to do it, the Prime Minister takes drastic measures against them. And second point, head of the cabinet. The Prime Minister is the head of the cabinet. The Prime Minister appoints a number of cabinet ministers, basically who were the confidential, since the cabinet is a confidential ministry, the ministers who are reliable to the Prime Minister can depend on them. Prime Minister had faith and belief on them, only they are appointed as the cabinet ministers by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister himself make a list of the cabinet ministers and then advises to the President to appoint them as cabinet ministers. Then the ministers come and take their oath. Since the Prime Minister is the head of the cabinet, the decisions taken by the cabinet ministers are in consultation with the Prime Minister. That means no cabinet minister can take any decision without the consent of the Prime Minister. Besides, the Prime Minister shuffles and allocates the departments of the cabinet ministers in consultation with them. Since the Prime Minister is the head of the cabinet, the decision of the Prime Minister is final. That means one minister is going to abroad for an official tour. He is going there as the representative of the country. So what role does the minister play? It is decided by the Prime Minister, but in consultation with other confidential ministers like cabinet ministers. That's why it is said that the Prime Minister is the head of the cabinet. And next one, head of the country. The Prime Minister is the head of the country. The Prime Minister's role as the head of the government, as the head of the country, is very important because the decision taken by the Prime Minister and his ministry and his department and his government helps our country, helps the country to be self-sufficient, rich, prosperous, wealthy. For that reason, the role of the Prime Minister is very important. Since the Prime Minister is the head of the country, the decision of the Prime Minister is final. The Prime Minister can dissolve the Lok Sabha, the Prime Minister can, declare national emergency, financial emergency, constitutional emergency, whenever he considers it to be very important for the country. The Prime Minister, in the interest of the national integrity and security, he can declare presidential election in any, union territory or in any state of India, because whenever sometimes law and order is disrupted, the state minister, means chief minister of any state, fails to establish law and order strongly. In that case, under Article 356, the Prime Minister can declare presidential election there. The presidential form of government there, presidential form of government. In that case, the presidential rule starts from there. As a head of the country, the Prime Minister can do it. The Prime Minister can frame a number of good policies for the welfare of the country. The Prime Minister can set up trading relations with foreign countries. The Prime Minister can establish bilateral talking with other countries, neighboring countries. The Prime Minister can survey, you know, the report of different ministers so that better development can be possible throughout the country for better service of the people. Besides, the Prime Minister, as the head of the country, can declare peace treaties with other countries, can establish cordial relations with neighboring countries, and can suggest some ideas to cabinet ministers like foreign minister, finance minister, defense ministers, those who are the most important ministers of the country, means cabinet ministers. They are suggested by the Prime Minister so that they are suggested good ideas, they are suggested good policies so that they must make it for the all-round development of the country. And next point, head of the government. The Prime Minister is the head of the government. The longevity of a government depends on how does the Prime Minister maintain law and order throughout the country. The duration of the Prime Minister is about 5 years. But sometimes some Prime Ministers cannot complete the normal tenure 5 years. Before completing the normal tenure, the Prime Minister has to prove his majority in the House if coalition government is there in that case. If any government gets majority in the election, in that case, Prime Minister generally does not face this kind of things and is able to complete his 5 years normal tenure. But in the case of coalition government, sometimes the Prime Minister fails to complete his normal tenure, 5 years, and then further election sometimes may be held, or different political leaders, they shifted one Prime Minister from his or her power and then make another one as the Prime Minister of the country. For example, that incident happened when after the fall of the Congress, when Congress failed to get majority support, even many seats in Lok Sabha election under the leadership of Rajiv Gandhi, another, the coalition government was formed in the center, and one after one leader became the Prime Minister of India. First VP Singh, then Chandrasekhar, then Devegowda, then I.K. Gujral, Chandrasekhar, Morarji Desai, Morarji Desai, Chandrasekhar, Charan Singh, one by one, political leaders became Prime Minister for 8 months, 1 year, 6 months, like that. So it may be happen during crisis period. If any political party fails to get majority support and if coalition government is established in the country, that's why the role of the Prime Minister, the role of the President is very important when the coalition government is established in the country. So these are the points, my dear students. I discuss about Prime Minister. Next day I shall discuss about President. Then the teaching of this lesson will be completed. At last I shall revise this. I shall re-explain certain points of this lesson for some schools' conveniences. Then I shall complete teaching of this lesson.